Hello, everybody, and welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Tracy Roberts. And today I am joined by a special guest by the name of Rob Allen, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about where he comes from and what he does. Rob, over to you.
Hi Tracy, hi everyone. So I'm Rob. I am. You probably shouldn't start with your job, but I'm going to start my job. I'm
Yeah.
Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Warwickshire Fire and Rescue Service. I look about 12. I tell everybody that all the time. I might have to add a couple of years on in the future. And the reason I say that is because it's hard to believe I've been in the fire service nearly 25 years. Um, I've moved around a
That's,
little bit. I was in West Mids, then Hereford and Worcester, and now Warwickshire. That's my background.
that's a long time to be in any job. But how old were you when you started in the fire service then, Rob, if it's been that long?
So I was 18 when I joined. My dad had been in the fire service since the 60s, and all I ever wanted to do was to be a firefighter. Yeah, I joined a different fire rescue team, but yeah, joined when I was 18. So had no experience, no life experience, and it probably told.
Amazing. That's amazing. And I think a lot of people, when they have got their purpose mapped out, it's quite important that they fulfill those dreams very early on. And usually people will see that career through. And obviously for yourself, that's a hell of a career. So I'm sure you see a plethora of changes in your time. Probably some good stories to tell, and probably some stories you can't tell as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah,
But And as a fellow kind of forces person, I think I can really kind of connect with like the job really is purpose based role, isn't it? It's something that you don't just go into it for the glamour, or you wouldn't think that anyway. So, what was it about the fire service, other than obviously watching people that were of big influence to you do that? What was it about the fire service that just made you think, yeah, that's my calling?
yeah. And I think most people that go through their print profile that have been in the fire rescue service, or a big chunk, have a two in there, and that's absolutely about helping other people. I probably didn't realise that when I wanted to join. I just wanted to be my dad, if I'm honest, but he didn't know that. He really didn't. Um,
Mhm.
but it was, what was it about my dad that made me want to do it? And I think that was, he was always available for everybody. He was a manager on the fire station, and people would just come to him with everything. They'd always seek his advice. They would ask him for support when they were in difficulty, and obviously the cool stuff. He would race off and go and help people at their moment of great need. And it was that probably drove me, and is the biggest influence in my life, from how my personality's developed.
Like, it is really good that you can recognise that early. I think what I definitely recognise as generations have shifted is that there's not always that direct connection with the purpose very early on in life. It's a little bit more trial and error, and kind of trying a few things, see what sticks and what feels good. Although we're more aware of obviously purpose in our lives, I think a lot of people takes a lot longer to find their why, so to speak. So it's so refreshing to hear someone who found their why so early through the influences they did, but also how you've managed to flourish in your career as well. So, and do you still love it? Is it something that still, gets you out of bed, excited on a Monday morning?
There are It's different, I would say. So I have an absolute passion for fire rescue. So helping, I just help in a different way now. So before I was helping, small teams, individuals, or you know, actually people at operational incidents, so fires and car crashes and those kind of things. Now I'm helping, bigger groups of people, or I'm collaborating with colleagues in the police or wider county council, which is the same. It's the same. It gives me the same feeling. It's still touching the same sense of purpose, but in a different way. Um, I would say that in a slightly different way, it could be more. It's more emotionally challenging probably now, because you don't get the adrenaline release of helping, an operational instance. So certainly not on a frequent basis. So you don't get that adrenaline rush. So you're really, it's kind of an endless churn of helping, in a more in a more bureaucratic way, or wider teams. So you don't instantly get the hit, which I suppose is the same for all. strategic leaders. You're looking for the future. You're planning, and you're looking for that future thing, which means you're not getting the dopamine hit every day
Yeah.
from work in the same way as I was when I was going out more operationally.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it, really, because I guess you're right. As you kind of come up that leadership ladder, sometimes it isn't that instant gratification, is it? It's not, go in and fix the thing very quickly. We've got to be a little bit more patient and let things kind of, run their course, so to speak. And that kind of leads into roughly what we were going to talk about today, where we're going to talk about leadership and all things leadership, but mainly just the difference in maybe some of the observations you've made over the years of the shifts in leadership. There was one thing that I was going to kind of lean into there, based on what you were saying there, is about that leader who's on the front line and leading a very very high profile team in a I don't know a very very stressful situation, and having to really step up quickly, and everyone looking at you for all the answers. And of course, traditionally we look at leadership styles as a moving part, don't we? We say people need to be conscious of their natural self and then be able to adapt to, we refer to 6 leadership styles, although I know there are different models out there, and say, what is required in this time. And what we find when we're talking to both public and private sector is there's a definite distinction between some of these leadership styles showing up more in certain environments. And sometimes it's down to the way it's communicated. So I'll give you a great example. Directive leadership normally gets a bad press. But why it gets a bad press is because people assume that that's delivered in a very, I don't know, threat state, maybe. That's probably the best way to explain it. So people barking orders. But in the environment you're in, directive leadership is required to get the job done. So I guess one of my observations before we kind of dip into the other bits is, from a directive perspective, thinking of all those kind of frontline situations you've been in, what do you observe in people that deliver directive leadership in the right way? What is it that they encompass that really brings it into fruition without getting people's backs up, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there is definitely there's two sides to our role. There is almost the business like side, which is probably 99% of our job, but then there is the 1% where you are in those, extremely challenging dynamic situations. Um, and I would say the thing that enables direct leaders, and we have to be direct in those spaces. You have to be, and when I say direct, you have to be really clear with your purpose. Where in the past you would have, in the other setting, you would have worked through it and helped and tried to coach the person to achieve their own
Yeah,
outcome. In that direct setting, it is, I want this, I want it at this time, to this standard, done. I don't want you to come back and tell me when it's done. Um, I think the difference and what makes it work is calmness first. Those direct leaders that do that in a calm and considered way, that their voice is controlled, that their body language is calm, naturally it brings that peace in the environment that you're working in when there's probably chaos all around you. And therefore, even if the language is more directive than normal, the calmness means that the right message comes across. I have seen people that take a different approach there and feel they need to shout and bark in a really traditional, direct sort of style. And although that might get results, people are really just thinking about their, the task that they've been given. And we talk a lot about decision traps in the fire and rescue service. Where people are blind and tunnel vision. People are blind to all the things around them, and I think leaders that take a direct and assertive approach without being calm, considered, and looking at the body language of those around them, they're much more likely to cause a decision trap because they're just literally following blind rather than because probably they're scared of what the outcome is rather than right. Actually, this person knows what they're talking about. Um, but maybe they don't know that bit, and I'm comfortable to then step up because maybe there's that little bit of humility that comes at the beginning of it, and that's why they're calm. That there's that human interaction, and therefore the message, which is direct, which is very clear, which is concise, is done in such a way that brings other people in and they feel ready to challenge.
I think that's such a good way to look at it. And I can think of leaders that I've worked with over, a long period of time as well, that I can definitely, now you've said that, relate back to their calmness, their composure, their ability to read the room. Um, But also, I think it comes from trust, doesn't it? It comes from that foundation of trust that, if someone asks you to do something, even when it is a high stress situation, that you trust that that person is able to make a decision. And equally, as you said, if there's something that we've maybe misunderstood, that people can step up and say, "Hey, but could we consider, or have we thought of this?" And I guess the language we use, and you know this from the retreat, is dynamic subordination. People
Yeah.
understanding it regardless of your role. You still got something to bring to the team, and if there's a particular set of attributes, or you have skills or information that's relevant to that situation, to be able to bring that forward. I think that's so important, and it must take a very specific type of person to stay calm and composed and communicative in some of the situations you've been in. um, and I guess it's good for you to be able to reflect on the people who've done it really well and the people who have not done it so well. And do you think that that kind of allows you some space to think about the way you present yourself as well? So as you've came up the ranks and you've been put into more, senior leadership positions, you've had to make tougher decisions. Do you always have that in the back of your mind as well?
Yeah, I think absolutely central to trust, and it probably is the same in every sector, but it is credibility. And in the fire service, where we are making decisions that are going to put people in places of harm, so fires or flood water, etc. Credibility is king and queen, really. You've got to have that. And I think the only way that you can do that is by, you've got to be visible, visible leadership. You've got to be seen to be doing it. And one of the challenges that you face, the further you go through the organization, is the harder that becomes, because people can't see and feel and interact with you. So whenever you are then having those interactions, it's really important that you've got to be on your A game. And that's really hard work, to be on your A game all of the time. Um, and there's an old adage, isn't it, that you cast a huge shadow as a strategic leader. Um, the, the the problem that you have, or the problem as I see it, is um, not only do you cast a huge shadow, but you also have to think about that shadow all of the time, every single minute, because the moment you switch off, and particularly if it's in a high stress environment, if you're dealing with a complex operational incident, the minute that you switch off is the minute that you either put somebody at risk, and therefore, obviously the negative impacts that would have, but also the impact on credibility and the spiral that can bring, um, from the impact of the service and to you as an individual. So um, there's some serious intensity, which I suppose, we go back to a question you said earlier about, do you still enjoy it? It's that pressure that makes this something that's still, that's the hit of adrenaline, is being on, being on the edge, being on the A game as much as you can. So you do have to be mindful all of the time about how you're delivering a message. What you're saying, why you're saying it, and how it's going to be received, which is a challenge, isn't it?
Particularly when you're working with diverse workforce that all have different communication styles. I guess the big thing that you've got there is that most people are there for the right reasons. They're there for a purpose, um, perspective. You'd like to think, at least. But I didn't really consider it that way. So I think that's great that you framed it like that. That it's when you're very visible, in a emergency situation, and you have the opportunity to step up and get your hands dirty. People will immediately respond to your credibility, your reliability, and obviously you create that rapport in there as well with people. But when you are a more strategic leader, you are right. You do have to kind of in some way get yourself to be a little bit more visible, so people can build that from the back of the house, so to speak. So maybe there is a little bit of food for thought there for some people as they're kind of coming up the ranks in their organisations and feeling that shift like you did, where it's like very obvious, I'm here, I'm doing the thing, and now you're kind of making the decisions behind the scenes sometimes and maybe not being as visible. So I think that's really a really good kind of perspective for people to consider. So directive, I guess for me, is the one that kind of jumps out, because when we talk about directive leadership in a private sector scenario, straight away there's the negativity. They don't make the connection between it necessarily being a means to an end, a set of rules we have to follow, a procedure we have to go through. That it's actually a good thing if it's delivered in the right way, which is in our challenge state, not threat state. And you mentioned coaching there because also coaching's got to be a big part of the kind of leadership elements that you'd like to think that you lead into in the fire service. Because if we don't give people that opportunity to grow and think for themselves from time to time in a, shall we say, a sort of reduced risk situation. You wouldn't do it in a high risk situation, I'm assuming. In a reduced risk situation, then obviously that that becomes a real part of their own self awareness, their own development. But that can be a challenge as well, right? Because one of the things that we spoke about previous to this was around hero leadership, around you as that key lead or that person who, I guess, some notes I wrote was, the confidence that you have because of the tenure you have, as an example, the experience you've got, and the confidence in your own decision making, if that makes sense, and courage that you must have to just forge forward, and people are all looking to you for the answers. And you become a victim of your own success a little bit, don't you? Because you've had that journey. So sometimes that can actually reduce the opportunity for you to plug in that coaching. And is that something that you've definitely sort of seen over your time in the service?
Yeah, 100%. So self-awareness is something as a sector has been talked about for a long time, and obviously we've been working with you since 2019. And I've been
Yeah.
fortunate to do that. The leadership retreat and some other personal development things with Warwick Business School. We run an executive leadership program, which all helps um, with analysing yourself and understanding your personality, and that core purpose of helping people, and then the shadow of being a strategic leader. Those two things just collide in really challenging ways, individually, but also for the organisation. We joke sometimes I'm terrible for it because I really, really like to help people. It is the thing that gets
Really
me out
difficult.
up in the morning. Yeah. That we laugh about. I put my cloak on and I'm Superman trying to help everybody. But the real risk with that is that you constrain, and it's knowing when is enough. I think is the lesson that I've learned over the last few years. When have we tested? When have we worked through some questions, me to another individual, that's helped them answer their own question rather than me providing? Or when have I just stepped straight through and gone back to, stepped over the chasm and gone straight into the almost the very soft smiling face of directive leadership with a no, it's this, here you go, there you go. Why don't you go and do that? That'll solve it for you. Here you go and do it. I would say that is probably the challenge because it links to my core purpose, because it links to my print profile. I'm an eccentric 2-4. That's the one that every single interaction is a challenge internally. Every single interaction where somebody says, "Bob, can I just pick your brain on this? What do you?" I've had one this afternoon. Somebody's said, "Oh, can I reach out to you? I'm involved in a disciplinary case. Would you mind if I pick your brain?" Yeah, no, yeah, not a problem. And inside, I'm already thinking, how yeah, how do I keep it in and ask them some questions and see where they're going, um, without answering it for them, which again, I think it goes back to that short term, long term. There is a massive dopamine hit by going, yeah, brilliant, excellent, thank you very much. I've answered your question.
Okay, it's a common thing in any kind of organization with subject matter experts. I don't think it's always leadership. I think sometimes it's subject matter expertise, isn't it? Tenure, all those things. I think you're natural, especially if, like you're naturally built to want to help other humans. It's quite natural to think, right, I can add value and save this right now. There's an element of control there too if you're a leader, because naturally you think, right, I don't want it to go off track. And sometimes, we just want that hit, but also we just want to feel like, because we're in such a busy cycle of next, onto the next, onto the next, it's like, oh, we're actually dealing with it and moving forward. And we sometimes refer to it as our advice monster. It's actually something that we lean into from a book called The Advice Trap. So if you get a chance to read that, listeners, it's really good. But it does tell you why, what Rob's explaining there, why you get that hit straight away by jumping in and trying to rescue situations, but it also obviously warns you of the downsides of not being able to plug those coaching questions in. And are you responding to someone's wants and not their actual needs, or vice versa sometimes? So I think it is worth mentioning that, that is a trap that you can fall into, hence it being called the advice trap. But yeah, and the other side of it is, and guess, is the notes I made was things like over dependence on people, single point of failure sometimes, we're maybe not allowing people to develop at the rate they could. And then leaning into something that we work with, or have been working quite closely with Rich Divining on the attributes element. So, we've got skills and we can build skills, but our attributes, we're kind of unsure sometimes about where people sit on the dial in a lot of these attributes. And as you know, if we can spot a couple of early signs or put them into situations where we kind of test them in a controlled manner, then actually we've got a likelihood that we're going to find things out about our team members that we didn't realize were true. If someone, we talk about someone who works in accounts, they're not going to want to go and do project management. Well, how do you know? How can we not, test the water and push people, outside their comfort zone from time to time? And that's something, if we lean into the save it kind of situation where we maybe would be as open to ask the questions to figure out, is it worth that risk? Is it worth actually developing someone by putting them out of their comfort zone? I bet most of the things that you've learned, Rob, have been through being out of your comfort zone. And it's
What
something that I should imagine you thrive on.
what you know me really well, Tracy. Yes, yeah, I I f- fill my life with a million and one things, just life experiences in order to try and test myself. And and clearly you're biased because you only see the world through your own eyes. Even if you try to see things from other perspectives, it's impossible to to really climb out your own head and climb into somebody else's. Um, uh, that I think has been that desire to do new things, to test myself and challenge myself, has been the thing that's allowed me to achieve, from a professional perspective, what I've achieved. But it's also brought with it the moments of discomfort that have allowed me to learn that have just, actually, I wouldn't do that again. I wish I hadn't done that. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I put myself in that space. But those things occurred, and I've got to remember not to do that next time. And like all humans, um, you still probably do similar, have similar learning opportunities again in the future. But I think the more of those I do, um, the better I'm going to be as a person, as a leader, because I can talk to the kids. I'm fortunate to have a 14, 11-year-old, as I was saying to you before we jumped on the call. Um, and my advice to them is always, say yes, go and give it a go. Go and what's the worst that can happen? Go and give it a go. Learn from the experience. And if you don't enjoy it, don't do it again. If you did, then maybe you found your vocation, or you found a hobby for life, or you've learned something about yourself that you didn't know before. Um, now, I suppose the best example of that is I was really unsure about leaving my last fire and rescue service. I'd been there 22 years, and all my professional friends, friends from work, I suppose, worked in that organisation. It was a really safe comfort zone. I was ticking along, um, but I knew I was bored. I knew I needed to be tested. I knew I needed a new challenge. And Warwickshire provided that. There was, there's things we wanted to do and needed to do. Um, but it was properly out of my comfort zone, Tracy, if I'm honest. It was a totally different environment. And all the things I'd learned about what a fire and rescue service was based on this one organisation, and it was totally challenged. And I've made some, as I'm sure colleagues have in the private sector, I've made some absolute assumptions that this new organisation is going to be just like that organisation, and if I just do it the way I did it here, it'll work, it'll be fine. And it hasn't, and it hasn't. And I've been really open with some of my colleagues. I'm really, I'm sorry, it didn't go the way I wanted, but that it threw me out of what was it's a vocation. It was been my home for 22 years in a real sort of family sense.
We could have sat there and, as you said, being comfortable, but for someone who likes to push themselves, I think it is important. I think the most important thing I think I reflect on, funnily enough, is reflection. Is actually, what did you learn in that moment? What can you take with you afterwards? And there's no such thing as things going wrong. You just learn from it, sort of thing. There are things that you'll steer away from in the future for sure, but there are definitely things that make you realise that you are tougher than you think, or you're more creative than you think, or you're more adaptable than you think. So I think for me, I think that's a really key learning for people, is to think about when the last time was they actually truly, like, stepped into their spectrum of growth a little bit more. And for me, it's not as straightforward as fixed and growth mindset. There's a whole plethora of stuff in there. For those of you who are interested, we've got some stuff on the hub around that about your spectrum of growth. So thinking about, what it is that you think that you are naturally higher in, and the stuff that you think you're kind of middle of the road, and some of those things you could push yourself. So for instance, some people can be really high in, taking risks. They think, yeah, I'll take any risk. I'll just see what sticks and I'll go with it. Other people think, oh, no, couldn't do that. And other people like to learn from their mistakes. So they'll purposely throw themselves into positions where they think they could fail. Others will avoid that. And then it could be down to something as simple as asking for help. We know that as leaders, we need support. As you said, your network was all where you used to be, and you had to go and create this whole new network. But part of you thought, oh, hey, it might not be so bad starting again and trying to see what help I can get from other people. So some people will not ask for help, and that is a problem on your spectrum of growth. It can hold you back a little. So I think for most people, it's important to know the things that you're good and maybe not so strong at in those areas, and think about how you can use that to your advantage. And it's interesting what you said there, because I think when we're talking about, you know, stepping out into, more of a growth curve for you, it is around being conscious of, what feels good for you at the time. So for you, stepping into that organization from a brand new perspective, I mean, the first thing you've got to do there is figure people out. All right.
Yeah.
So was that easy for you?
Um, I'm I'm an inherently trusting person. So I think it was very early on. I'd said, "Oh, there is no politics in." I'm really, I'm not seeing it. It's just not that obvious. Um, like every organisation, politics is there, and I was I was definitely, I was blinded by the positivity of this new environment, and I think that was a great piece of learning that I'd put over a bias of, I've chosen to do this. This is going to be brilliant, and I know it's going to be brilliant because it was a really big decision, and it took me some time to come to it. Clearly, I've made the right decision, and I have. But I think that positivity brought in a positivity bias of, this is brilliant. There is nothing here to fear. Um,
See you.
nothing to see. So, and don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about there being loads of, nefarious underhand stuff, but bits about, people's, the things that matter to people because they've been in the organisation for a long time, things that I probably had when I was in my old organisation, um, and then the risk of new people coming in and the challenge that might actually this might change all the things that we hold dear, and what do they know? Um, and I was really naive. We talked about the shadow. I was really naive because I'm there to help. In my mind, I'm there to help. I'm open. I'm creative. I'm there to, you know, I'm happy to say I'm wrong, um, and to change things. You know, I'm not coming to break everything up, but from other people's perspectives, how can they take me on face value after a week, a month, 2 or 3 months? Is really difficult. So that's building the trust from a different perspective. Not, we talked about credibility earlier. When you move through an organization, that credibility or that people's trust in you layers on top of each other. Even if people haven't met you, they've heard about how you operate. When you go into a new organization, um, that is a fresh start, and that takes some work. And that was the reason I found it really fulfilling. Just building, rebuilding, and testing relationships, pushing people, pushing myself to really get under the skin of the politics of the organisation and the people that work within it.
I guess a lot of that leans back into you as a human, with being massively purpose driven, looking for, being built with a creative mind and looking at opportunities and what now, that sort of approach. Because we all know that you are constantly looking for things to do. But also because you're massively humanistic, you want to go in there, you want to create good relationships, and build upon that. And I think that that is a massive testament to you and how you kind of operate. And that allows, of course, going back to something else in the leadership styles, which is collaborative leadership. You are really happy working alongside other people and, like you said, learning from them learning from you, being very open and honest, the great wins, the wooden spoons for when we got things wrong. And I think, again, that can be quite a tricky thing to navigate if you don't really have that depth in relationships. But if you're assuming best intent in most situations, which you are, I think that, there's a lot to be said for taking that approach, particularly when you feel that, you've created that base, at least, that people understand your expectations, and obviously that you're putting that level of trust in them. So I guess that makes a big difference, really, that you are naturally focused. It might be a little bit tougher. I was just reflecting on that, thinking, would it be a bit tougher for someone moving into the role that you did, in the situation you did, that maybe wasn't as humanistically driven? I'm not as able to read the room, and be as open to other people's perspectives. And I guess that not everybody does have that humanistic approach. So I guess that would be quite tricky in that situation, wouldn't it? Because it would take a long time to build that network back up.
And I think sectors, I can only speak from the fire sector, but if I try and widen that out, I think sectors where there isn't a massive amount of movement, or people, maybe in an exec team are there for a period of time, and you have a new person come in, I think
Yes.
that is a challenge. I talk to colleagues from the private sector who talk about, new CEOs come in, what does that mean for us? What's that going to mean for the organization? Where are we going to go? What's the direction? We've heard that they did this in their previous role. That sounds terrible. How on earth? I'll never work here. All of that kind of uncertainty comes with the person. And I suppose as leaders, you've got some choices. You can either take the time and think about the organization and try and feel its heartbeat, and then try and make, add value, do the changes
Yeah.
that you want to do. Or I suppose there is the other route, which is my approach has always worked. That's the way I'm going to go, and it's going to work. And in some cases, I suppose both would work. But for
Yeah.
me, I think you've got to really think about who you are and what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to achieve that in that new setting. Because if you don't even think about it, I think that's really the risk. Because everybody else will be. Everybody else will be looking at you thinking, what are they going to do? How are they going to operate? What does it mean to me?
You're so right about that perception. I don't know how many organisations I've been at where new exec people or new leaders have came in, and there's been that little rumble in the jungle, so to speak, about what they might bring, and that can be a little bit deflating for people, but even the leaders coming in, because one organisation isn't the same as the other. It doesn't mean they're going to come and do the same thing. And as you said, it's situational. But I think, I guess, a part of that is that expectation that person's going to challenge the status quo. And as we know, people don't tend to like change. Or actually, I'll change that. I think people won't change because they tend to have moans and groans and stuff that isn't working so well. The problem is they don't want change, and that's the difference. They want the change to happen so that things can improve. But do they want to adapt their style? Do they want to adapt the way they see the world? Not always, because it's tricky for all of us. So I think as leaders, it is our job to make sure we're, gauging that correctly and taking people with us on the journey performance through our people. And in my experience, people who grow their network and have that rapport and that reliability and all those things going for them in abundance, they are supported fully on the way up. And when they're at the top, they're revered, and people do look up to them. And yeah, there probably is a little bit of hero status going on there, but they also understand how to shut that vice monster up from time to time and allow people to grow with them. Super important. I think one thing I was probably going to land on there, because we work with also a lot of private and public sector, was, what do you think the biggest frustrations are? And I mean frustrations because some of these things can't be helped, with working in public sector, as opposed to someone who is listening in right now who's working in a private sector organisation and maybe doesn't have that insight into some of the stuff that can be really frustrating for you.
I was thinking about it from a conversation we had in the past, and there are so many similarities. Just the words are different. We talk about putting our community first. Well, for private sector, that's putting their customers first. That it's if you lose sight of your customer base and you're totally navel gazing and thinking about you and the organisation, and you're really dialed in, then you fall behind your competitors, and your world starts to fail. It's exactly the same from a public sector perspective. If we are totally focused, and that does happen from time to time in the public sector, and I've seen it happen in fire and rescue services where we get very, very focused into, we should look after our people, but we get focused in on our people, we get focused in on us and our systems and our structures. What absolutely what should be at the front and centre is our community. And lots of work has occurred over recent years to make sure that one, that we are doing it, it's the right thing to do, but also that we're really focused in. It's the first thing. So the national value set, core code of ethics has changed to put that first. And you know, I spoke to colleagues when it first came out, and people didn't. There was really mixed views, but I think that's been probably been 2 years now, and it genuinely is. The focus of everything in terms of our strategy, in terms of everything we do. What's the impact on the community here? What does this going to actually mean? What you see and hear in the news about all public sector probably, but definitely about fire and rescue services is the nuts and bolts, is the bit around the people. So is some of the industrial action, is maybe pay claims, is bits around bureaucracy, but actually, if you think about who you see and you interact from a public sector perspective, you know, 99% of the people you interact with, they're all trying to help, they're trying to add value, they're trying to do something for the community. The vast majority will have joined that industry or that sector to help, and therefore having community first probably helps the more strategic elements of the public sector. Just make sure that we're just testing the water. Are we still here to do that? Is that still our purpose? And does everybody know that it is? We put in community first. Um, but I think there's two other bits that I think are very similar. So politics is in place in both private sector and the public sector. It's just a different type. It's just a different type of politics.
Politics and
Yeah,
politics.
and
Yeah.
there's some real joys with politics in in that environment in the public sector in terms of scrutiny, etc. That we are a better organisation from having as a broad UK FRS for having scrutiny from external people looking at our organisations and testing us to make sure that we are putting the community first, that we're value for money, all of those things. I, I don't see those as a barrier. I think they're really important, because if they don't, how do we demonstrate to the community that we are adding value? How do we demonstrate that we're putting our money where we should be putting our money? That that our resources are meeting the most diverse needs in our community. They're not just based on our operational whims or whatever. It asks, governance asks the difficult questions that we might not ask ourselves. I mean, you'd hope that we do, but we can't see it from every perspective, even if we try. And governance, although it does get a bad rep. You hear that around the public sector. But my personal view is that all forms of governance, shouldn't be looked at as a negative thing. It should be seen as an opportunity to test how well you're doing, and how sound your strategy is.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it, because I do think some people would think red tape, frustrations, multiple stakeholders, slow decisions, those things. And of course, some of that will be true in certain elements, I'm sure. But you're absolutely right. It's there to protect situations, people, and allowing you, thinking from other perspectives and stuff that you might not consider on a day-to-day basis, because we do fall into our own what we have our own lenses on, don't we? We kind of have our levels of importance for us or the organisation. So I think it's important that those things are outlined, because I think people would see them as things to slow you down or frustrations, rather than actually as the way you described it there is actually an opportunity, which
Yeah,
is a good thing to
a-
consider.
and certainly from a slowing down perspective, those are the big decisions. And we need to take time, because it's not impacting our community now. It's impacting our community for maybe 5 or 10 years, and therefore, um, if we were to do that really quickly, and we like to move with purpose. We're firefighters, and therefore we love firefighting in the literal sense, and in the metaphorical sense. Um, but we do need to take the time to make sure that we're making these decisions in an effective way. So yeah, and not afraid of scrutiny, even if it does at times make things take longer than you'd expect in the private sector.
So it's good to draw those comparisons. So I thought you could definitely see them. To drill down into things, there would be differences in the way that you approach things. But I love how you kind of compare the customer service side of things, or the customer to the community, and those approaches being similar. Because again, all too often segregate and sort of think it's very different. And although it is different, there's a different perspective on it. So I really appreciate your kind of refreshing perspective on that there. And I guess for me, I think another question I had for you, based on this sort of style of podcast that we're doing today around, what you've learned, and also what you've been working with us on in your organisation was, from a leadership perspective, we often joke about, you don't necessarily go to leadership school, if that makes sense. You kind of, the way I see it is you're kind of going up a hill with a little backpack, and you're kind of filling it with your skills and kind of developing your attributes. Then you get to a ledge called the leadership ledge, and someone says, "Here you go, here's a leadership role." And you go, "Oh, can I put this backpack down now?" And they go, "No, you've got to keep carrying that and then just keep going." And you go, "Well, do I get like a folder of stuff to do, like stuff to learn?" And they're like, "No." And I guess, in a role such as firefighter, or in a service such as a fire service, a lot of it is all about, learning from situations, being very hands-on, and developing in that sense. But from a leadership perspective, I guess it is a little bit trickier. And what sort of changes have you seen over the years, other than obviously starting to work with us in 2019, which is obviously the main reason why everyone is so amazing at Warwickshire Fire and Rescue? But what changes have you seen, or have we seen any?
Yeah, so when I joined in the late 90s, it was a far more well, quasi-militaristic, I think is the phrase that
Okay.
an anthropologist would use. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I think it was far more uniformed service. Stand up when people enter the room, call you sir. Although there are elements of those traditions that still run through the service. But that did bring with it distance, I think, between what would be classed as officers and non-officers. That was in my mind. I probably didn't see it when as a problem when I was a non-officer, for want of a better phrase, when I was a firefighter, or when I was a watch manager, which is somebody that rides in charge of a fire appliance. Um, I didn't really see that divide. I was always happy to say what I think, or challenge the status quo, or get my hands stuck in. Um, and I didn't really know why, to be honest. I know, there's no apart from I wanted to help, and kind of I was probably helping my team, and thought,
yes.
I'm going to move things forward. Um, I would like to think over the intervening years that that divide in terms of personality and accessibility has reduced. So um, I was on a number of fire stations last week, and was had really free and open conversations with firefighters, which they say they wouldn't have had previously. And that's not a criticism of leaders that have gone in the past. That was just the culture of the time, that those kind of free and open conversations were much harder to do because of the roles that people were doing, but also the structure of the organisation, the natural culture around it being militaristic. And if you're expected to call somebody sir and stand up every time they enter the room, how likely are you to tell them that the thing that they've just suggested that you do is a really bad idea? Um,
Mm.
and we're just humans, and I'm sure I come up with a fair share of my own bad ideas. Um, and I desperately want, as I know all of my colleagues do, we want people to feel confident that they can say to us, "That's a really bad idea," and these are the reasons why. Not necessarily it's just a bad idea because I think so, but the evidence behind it that says, actually, for these reasons, have you thought about that? Have you thought about the other? And I think the quasi-militaristic world of the fire service of the past didn't enable that. It disabled it. There were so many barriers and walls. Diversity in the fire and rescue service has historically been a problem, and I know I sit here as a white, I don't look it, but middle-aged man. Um, but there's a whole thing there about how individual the fire and rescue service is or has been, and how easy it is to be different. Um, and have have definitely seen through things like our interaction with T2, through an increase in diversity, through probably through a difference in the type of people that join the organisation from a maybe come from a university background, that individuality is now much more present and really clear, which is a brilliant thing. Than it ever was in the past. And I really hope that that journey continues, that people are more open, they're more willing to engage with each other, and individuality is just celebrated in the fire service. Because if it isn't, what we're just constraining the conversation, and we're never going to grow and develop if we don't harness each person's strengths.
You open up so much, extra possibilities there, aren't there, through diversity, open communication, open door policy sort of thing. That, but actually doing it, that's another thing. Because people say, "Oh, my door is always open," except when it's not open.
Which is most
um,
of the time.
yes, which is most of the time. And I sit behind the desk, and when you come in, there's always a barrier there. It's those small things that make a big difference, isn't it? So, yeah, it's good to hear that you to hear in a way that you can make that connection from what it was to what it is now. And I know from a lot of the work that we're doing together that you're really making a difference there. Um, and I guess that kind of links me into some of my last questions, because also we've been doing a lot of work together. We've got some exciting stuff coming up, that we've been getting we've been getting pretty sort of excited about and doing a lot of planning for. But I'd really like, just a few kind of thoughts from you around, the work that you've done with us as an organisation, how you think it's made a difference really in the time that we've been working together. And maybe just some thoughts on from you personally and what you've taken from working with us, even through, the self-development element and the understanding to the tools that we've, been working with, and how that's, hopefully gonna support you in your career moving forward.
Yeah, definitely happy to, Tracy. So, I've been incredibly fortunate that I've had loads of professional development over the years. The fire service is brilliant for that. We've, the executive leadership program thing with Warwick Business School I was talking about earlier, but the thing that taught me more about myself than anything else was 3 days in 2019 when Martin and Spence brought my print profile and gave me me on 2 pages, which it made so much sense. It really did. There were so many things that I just thought, yeah, that's why I do that, and that's why I feel so frustrated. There was it's a well-known adage now, I think. It's been talked about quite a bit. I had a colleague that I get on with everybody, but we didn't really get on. He used to press my chimp release button, and I used to do it for him. And his purpose was about protecting and feeling valued, and mine was about helping other people. And so we were talking very similar language, but from a completely different perspective. We used the tools that we'd taken from that session to go and help make our relationship better, which meant I could challenge him in a way that he needed, and he could also articulate back to me why he had done what he did, and that made sense then. So from my perspective, I wasn't seeing the negative. I could understand how he got to that place, because with any of these things, there's fault or issue or challenge on both sides. This is not me good, him bad, me good. This is a misunderstanding. How do we come together? So the print profile, and I've tidied up my office over the weekend, and I found I've got 3 copies of my print profile, which is just no, right, no. So that definitely helped, and I know it helps a lot of my colleagues too. And we have consistently used that language with each other since 2019. And I'm really keen, as you know, to push the boundaries, to understand psychology and how that helps. It helps us grow and develop, but also, probably most importantly, you talked about challenge state earlier, how we get ourselves into those really enriching environments that we test ourselves, and then we step back afterwards and say, right, how do we feel about that? What do we like? What didn't we like? Why didn't we like it? Because we're all really busy, and I'm sure the private sector, public sector. As a firefighter, we are, as I said earlier, we're either metaphorically or literally firefighting all of the time, as I'm sure everybody else is. But how do we take a breath and just pause and reflect on why we did whatever we've done? And the work that we've done with T2 has helped us do that. Just to step aside for a little bit and go, right, what are we going to do? And the future's exciting. You alluded to what we're doing with you currently. That's our work around promotion processes, which both as a sector and as a service is a challenge, because go back to the quasi-militaristic stuff I was talking about earlier. There's a real view that we just do senior leaders just do what they want. That's how it works. And that is not what I want. What I want is the best people. I want a group of individuals where we can get all of that collective brilliance and make a brilliant fire and rescue service. That is what I want. And I'm not the right person to say what brilliant is, because my version of brilliant is different to your version of brilliant. And what T2 are going to provide us is an opportunity for lots of different independent people to have a look at our people and say, right, this is their brilliant, this is their version of brilliant, and how we think they can add value, and to do it in a really transparent way. As you know, we're looking at videos which then we can link into their development plans to help them see how they react and interact in those environments. We genuinely believe, as you can probably tell from the passion in my voice, that this is going to help us make a brilliant fire and rescue service. So we're excited. It's definitely where we are.
We're excited to support you guys. We always love working. Everybody in the office fights for a Warwickshire gig. We all want to come down and see everyone, so that's always a good sign. And what I also love is it's not just exec level. It's not just the senior leaders of the organisation. We've funneled all the way down to the rest of the organisation. There are people right, down newbies coming through the service that are using print profiling are going on and learning about leadership and all those things to help them develop. But there's also people relearning at the top and adapting and opening up their spectrum of growth. And I think that's what makes it successful in an organisation. What also helps is having some key champions like yourself in the organisation that will take that and have a team of people around them that support it internally, because we can go in as an organisation and provide all these amazing tools, but all we are really is a sticking plaster if someone doesn't take it in the organisation and go, right, how do we use this effectively? And I really truly believe that you guys do that, which is why when it comes to the assessment centre side of things, we feel that you can make a real difference. So we're really looking forward to that, and obviously looking forward to supporting you guys moving forward on anything else that comes up, because we absolutely adore working with you. So it's been really great to spend some time speaking to you today. We really appreciate you giving us some of your free time. So here's my question for you. Every time someone asks you a question, in your brain, say to yourself, if I'm saying yes to this, what am I saying no to? That's
Tracy,
my question to you this week.
I'm probably saying no to a little bit more sleep. It's probably what I'm doing.
Don't do that. Really, lovely having a chat with you today. I guess for me, it's about working closely with our partners, seeing things from your perspective, because you're right, perspective taking is difficult. We can only see it through the lens we have. So it's just great to hear from the inside the benefits that you were seeing from the work you're doing individually and as an organisation as well. And we were really fortunate to also have you with us on our leadership retreat last year. Well, this year. The reason I keep saying last year is because we're already working on next year's. And you're a real key kind of influencer and contributor in that. And I just saw you thrive in that environment. And I guess last question for me was, what did you get from it? And what did you take back with you?
So it was excellent. And I think the main thing I took back was around that diversity of network. It's really easy to stay in a sector bubble, particularly if you're in a sector like mine where you stay in it for a very long period of time. So there are a couple of contacts that I've kept in my phone. We've messaged only a couple of times, to be fair, but I think in that really intense window, I particularly think of Mike. We went running together. We talked about really intimate things that you think I just wouldn't have had those kind of conversations. I have no doubt. We talked about this at the end. Um, that reach out. Do you know what? I just could do with some advice. I don't actually. You're the go-to person. You know this stuff. Um, I felt it gave me that. It gave me a network, an informal network of people that worked at a similar level but in different organisations. And I suppose because of the intensity of the retreat, it just supercharged that connection in a way that I don't think I've had in another event like that. So yeah, there's at least a couple of people that I have maintained their contacts, and I know if I was to reach out tomorrow that they'd answer and they'd be able to help me with my problem because we'd had that connection.
It's a really great way to look at it. I think network is super important, and you're absolutely right with the intensity. But what we should be clear on with the intensity, it's not that we're going to pluck you out of an airplane.
Okay.
Not this year anyway. But in terms of that level of vulnerability that you had to show from the get-go, in terms of doing your psychometrics with each other and sharing your experiences. But what I personally really embraced from that was the people who came were in it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I am fully here, I'm fully engaged. I can see the level of people that are here, and I'm actually, quite impressed that there's that many kind of sets of experiences to dip into. But the connection came very quickly, didn't it, within an hour or two? And I think that when we all left the retreat, we felt that we'd created something special. So I'm guessing it's a full recommendation from you if anyone wants to think about signing up for 2024.
100%. The one thing it would be absolutely remiss of me not to say is the speakers were incredible. All three speakers. I've got Rich Davini's book just here. I'd always wanted to meet Sir Dave Brailsford, and he absolutely lived up to everything. Everything that I thought. Go back to the point about individuality. That's about those marginal gains. That's about taking everything from everybody to make a brilliant organisation. And the one thing the retreat, one of the many things the retreat had is that pull to bring in those excellent speakers, and that was far surpassed my expectations.
Well, we know that we got such a response from you all, and we're just at the moment, Martin and I'm working with Rich Davini on possibility of a partnership and some work that we're going to do with him. So we're really excited to bring the attributes to the UK. And the speakers that we've got this year are going to be second to none. We're super excited. We're making announcements slowly and surely, but keep your eye out on social media, guys, if you're interested. But yeah, I bet you're gutted that you can't come again this year. How are you?
I am, but you've got to share the love. Although, even though I don't want it, but yeah, you got to share the love.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Rob. Really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to coming down and see you in the next couple of weeks to get some work started. Have a great week, and we will see you again soon with the T2 Hubcast.
Thanks, Tracy. See you later.
Thank you.